I don't know. So, last night, I decided to watch The Happening, written, produced, and directed by the one and only M. Night Shyamalan. Mark Wahlberg, Zooey Deschanel, and John Leguizamo are in this movie, along with some other people that are recognized from other pieces of media. I've heard about this movie for a while, that it was so bad that it's hilarious, that it's one of the greatest comedies, unintentional comedies, actually. I've seen clips of it online, I've seen people talk about it. I put this off for a while, thinking there's no way that I'm going to be able to watch this. But lo and behold, on impulse, I decided to give it a go. And I was greeted with this. A woman literally stabs herself in the neck. Kind of told me everything I needed to know about this movie. I mean, ultimately, I was going to have to decide for myself whether or not I was going to think it was so bad it's hilarious. And there's definitely moments like that in this movie, which we'll talk about. But the whole thing I found to be very bizarre and very...
Enigmatic? Vast?
No, not vast.
Well, maybe not like that. At this point with M. Night Shyamalan, 2008, he already had his success with Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. He did The Village, which a lot of people hated because of the twist ending, but now, as time has gone on, it's developed somewhat of a cult following. Lady in the Water has a similar reputation, I guess, depending on who you talk to. Some were starting to see a decline in his quality. Not exactly sure what went on after that with The Village. Maybe he got in over his head after a lot of people didn't like the way it ended. Maybe he was trying too hard. I don't know. But I guess most, if not all, artists are going to have a misstep of some kind. So I guess Shyamalan was bound to go downhill with his storytelling, especially after some people were questioning whether or not he was the next Spielberg. When one film that you make gets nominated for a lot of Oscars and a lot of people start to consider you to be the new Steven Spielberg, talk about pressure put on your shoulders. I don't envy him for having that kind of scrutiny. I would not want to be him. The discourse around Shyamalan has been talked to death by now. It's kind of simmered down since he's made movies like Glass and Split, and that one movie he did, I think it was earlier this year or the last year, Knock at the Cabin. I have yet to see that though. He's made somewhat of a comeback, so I don't think people are on him as much anymore, but you'll still get people who will talk about the bad stuff that he made, including this one. I guess we're gonna have to go into spoilers on this one, so if you have somehow never seen The Happening, well, I gave you the warning. This movie is so, like I said, bizarre, weird, amazing, hilarious in all the wrong ways, and somehow entrancing at the same time. But the plot of this movie is that there's all these deaths happening across the northeastern United States. People are stopping in place, taking a couple steps backward, and killing themselves in various ways. Like that one woman in Central Park stabbing herself in the neck, and somehow the woman next to her is immune to this thing that's going on, and she's able to see everything that's about to happen all at once, I guess. I don't know. And people start to fall off of these high-rise construction sites, and it's one of those moments that's meant to make you go, whoa, that's really terrifying. But the characters' responses don't match to what we're supposed to be feeling. The big problem with everybody in this movie is that everyone is so overly serious that there's no sense of agency or urgency or fear. I mean, there is, but not in the ways that we would expect to see in something like this. And people start to suspect that it's a bioterrorist attack, which is spreading an airborne neurotoxin. And I think people would be right to assume that, especially in a post-9/11 world. Then we get introduced to Elliot Moore, played by Mark Wahlberg, who is a science teacher. And I've heard plenty of people say their 2 cents on Mark Wahlberg being a science teacher. I don't really think it's that big of a deal, but still, the thought of him teaching science, I don't think it worked. If he was a gym teacher, then maybe I would actually take him more seriously. The thing about his introduction, it spoils the entire movie. He tells her that it's a scientific event that nobody will ever be able to explain. As other people have said, it would make you go, so he basically told me everything that's going to happen in this movie. I've seen a whole bunch of reviews of it by now, so I wasn't too surprised by that. It's meant to be a commentary on how plant life isn't exactly too happy with how humankind has basically abused Mother Earth. In theory, that's not a bad idea. But the way the film carries it out is, well, everything I described it earlier on. Mark Wahlberg's performance in here, I don't really know what to say. I don't really like to say this about actors, but his acting is really bad. And Zooey Deschanel, the same thing. Nobody in this movie is good. I'm putting it out there right now, and I'm going to say this as many times. I don't like saying that about actors because they are trying as hard as they can. How am I supposed to take Mark Wahlberg seriously when he goes,
You don't have an opinion?
You're not interested in what happened to the bees. Come on, buddy. Take an interest in science.
Makes you kill yourself, just when you couldn't think of any more evil that could be invented. I exploded with laughter, the way she delivered that line. I'm serious. So the news is going on about everybody dying in Boston and in Philly, and the schools decide to dismiss everybody in order to get the kids to safety. Order given by the principal, played by Alan Ruck, Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, who only appears once in this movie. Thankfully, he's not in there for very long, and I do like the guy, but he doesn't have to be strung down by this really awful script. We'll just put it that way. So John Leguizamo shows up as a math teacher who's really into math, numbers, and probabilities and all that stuff. I'm indifferent on John Leguizamo in this movie. I think he's alright as an actor and comedian. I'm not a big fan of his. He has his moments here and there, but I don't really think I need him in this movie. What really gets me is that he abandons his child and dumps her onto Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel just so he could go find his wife in Princeton. If I had a child, there is no way in hell, no chance in hell that I would abandon her, especially when all this death is happening. And the daughter doesn't get all that upset that her father leaves. Nobody reacts in the ways that they should, and whenever they do, it's so overly dramatic, and I'm finding myself laughing because I had all these different kinds of emotions that I was feeling. The way they filmed these scenes, the awkward camera angles, and the way everybody falls down, I thought, am I supposed to be laughing or am I supposed to feel scared? I can't tell the difference either way. There's even a handful of side characters that we see, like the soldier who just appears out of nowhere and goes,
"Cheese and crackers."
Cheese and crackers? Who talks like that? Then we get the hot dog guy who has his own greenhouse and tells Mark Wahlberg that he feels that it's the plants that are causing this. And he has this weird obsession with hot dogs.
You know, hot dogs get a bad rap. They got a cool shape, they got protein. You like hot dogs, right? You like hot dogs, don't you?
What do hot dogs have to do with the plants? The best part is that his eyes are as big as dinner plates when he says, "You like hot dogs, don't you?" I guess it's supposed to be a lighthearted thing or a moment where it eases the tension, but it doesn't come off in the way that it should. So Mark Wahlberg starts to figure out that the plants are probably getting upset over the fact that there's so many large groups of human beings cluttering around these areas, and they react to human stimuli, which is what the hot dog guy was talking about. Good idea in theory. Again, it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel right. The wind is treated like a really dangerous presence, especially when it blows the neurotoxins from the plants, and it doesn't feel like anybody's in danger. Because again, everybody's acting so serious, and I keep coming back to that. But especially when everybody starts to kill each other in the middle of the field just over the hill, this reaction gets me in the wrong way.
Oh no.
What oh no?
What do you mean, what oh no? Could it be that there's people shooting themselves with a gun? As far as parts that I don't think are that bad, there's one small moment that Mark Wahlberg has with John Leguizamo's character's daughter, where he shows her this mood ring and he says, "Oh, it's yellow. That means you're about to laugh." And he does something that makes her laugh. And it's something that I think Mark Wahlberg would do in his other movies or maybe in real life. And I like how they adopt her as their own child, even though I don't really like how she didn't even react to the fact that her father abandoned her, but that's neither here nor there. But that mood ring moment is ruined when this one random woman says, "Oh my god, look at this." And it's this zookeeper allowing the lions in the zoo to eat off his hands and maul him to death. Who in their right mind would show that to some random person that they wouldn't even know? There is an overall plot that's going on with Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel that they're having some marital problems. There's this guy named Joey that keeps calling her and she keeps brushing him off. And then she tells him about this guy and his reaction is, "You lied to me? I'm sorry." But it never gets talked about again. But then that gives us a moment with Mark Wahlberg where I am just...
I'm talking about a completely superfluous bottle of cough syrup. That's like $6.
Are you joking?
What a story, Mark.
That is some of the worst acting I have ever laid eyes on. I feel so bad for saying this because Mark Wahlberg... I love the guy. Zooey Deschanel is just as guilty. It's not their fault. This is the script and direction from Shyamalan. I've seen clips of Mark Wahlberg behind the scenes talking with Shyamalan where he's not entirely sure if this is a good idea, and they're accompanied by these two teenage boys, one of them played by Spencer Breslin, who's the brother of Abigail Breslin from Signs. Neither of these kids seem to be concerned about where their parents or family or friends are. They're just acting so calm and casual, like, oh yeah, the world's going to hell, but we don't care, we're just gonna hang with you guys because we could use some help. If that were me, I would be freaking out over whether or not my parents or friends or sister are alive. I know I shouldn't get this upset, it's just a movie, but the illogic surrounding this whole thing astounds me. But of course, we get the moment in the model home where Mark Wahlberg talks to a houseplant. A fake houseplant.
We're just here to use the bathroom. And then we're just gonna leave. I hope that's okay.
I had to pause the movie and get up and walk around for about 40 seconds after that. I've seen some crazy things happen in movies, but it was just one of those things where I thought, I cannot believe what I'm watching. On top of that, when they arrive at this house where it's concealing these two survivors who don't trust anybody, which might as well be Bill from The Last of Us, who doesn't trust anybody except for Frank and maybe Joel, Mark Wahlberg tries to convince them that they're normal by going,
On Blackwater, keep on rolling, Mississippi moon, won't you keep on shining on me?
if you're trying to convince somebody that you're normal, don't do that. But then these kids start acting like rioters and trying to get these guys to give them the food, and then they get blown away from behind the window. They open the shutters when the wind is blowing all these toxins in the air. Maybe that's not a good idea? Especially when the young girl's swinging from a maple tree that's possibly giving off the same bad vibes like the other plants are. And I know I'm not the only one to say this. Why aren't they wearing gas masks? Wouldn't anybody start to ask for masking of some kind? If you're that smart enough, maybe you should put something over your face to not breathe this stuff in? But then they arrive at the woman's house, who's a loner and doesn't like contact with the outside world. They try to tell her what's going on, and she doesn't want to hear any of it. She slaps away the girl's hand when she tries to get something sweet from the table. Nobody acts shocked or appalled. They just go, oh, well, hello? You don't treat a child like that. But on the other hand, we get this great moment.
Planning on stealing something?
No, ma'am, we're not.
Plan on murdering me in my sleep?
What? No.
I think I might be saying that in real life from now on when somebody asks me if I did something wrong. What? No. But then the woman ends up killing herself when she walks around outside, breaks the windows down, causing the wind to go in. Mark Wahlberg then goes into the basement and he manages to talk with Zooey Deschanel, and they have a nice moment where they talk about their first date and their past history together. I do kind of like that. But then they have to go outside realizing that maybe this is the end for them, so they'll die together. And it actually turns out that the threat is over. And we even get the news reporter telling us everything that's going on, and just in case we don't understand any of it. That kind of stuff happens in movies like this. I'm not really that offended by it, but still, we get the picture, Shyamalan. You don't need to remind us. So the thread ends, it cuts to 3 months later. They adopted this young girl, and Zooey Deschanel's gonna have a baby. Things seem to be going okay with her and her husband. Oh, and did I mention the Philadelphia headline earlier on? Yeah, that was really on the nose, wasn't it? Oh my god, I just remembered this. When they're on the train and they stop in the middle of nowhere just because they couldn't keep in contact with their destination. We've lost contact. With whom? Everyone. I don't think a train would just stop in the middle of the railroad track when it doesn't have any contact with its destination. It would keep going just to assume that maybe everything's okay, right? I'm not a transportation expert, but I would assume that that's not going to happen. And they wouldn't let everybody disperse on their own when they don't know where the hell they're at. And again, that conductor's response is just another example of how everybody's so serious in this movie, they don't act in the way that they're supposed to. But the film ends with the same thing happening in Paris, France. After this scientist is talking to this news reporter about, well, actually it could happen somewhere else. Well, maybe if it did happen somewhere else, I'd take it more seriously. And what do you know? Things start brewing up in Europe. So I guess if I had to come up with a verdict on the happening, if it was supposed to be scary, it certainly didn't come off that way. If it was supposed to be funny, it certainly hit the mark on that one. Definitely not in the ways that they were hoping, though. Certain scenes, like I mentioned, were just very laughable. And I don't know if that was Shyamalan's intention. I think he initially wanted it to be legitimately scary in the right ways, but then he changed his tune right before the movie came out and said, yeah, it's just a B movie. We're being intentionally cheesy. I think he might have gotten that right, but I don't think the final result is exactly what he had in mind. I'm still in a lot of ways processing this, but I certainly would not watch this movie again. I don't find any replay value in this one. And if some people do, I can totally understand. But I'm not going to sit down and chug popcorn in my face and laugh at just how stupid this movie is. I can do that maybe with a couple here and there, but with this, I'm not going to waste my time again. I'll give the movie this. Besides those couple of small moments that I mentioned, James Newton Howard's score is actually not that bad, especially in the opening credits, where in a way it kind of reminded me of the opening of Psycho, where it's like a very creepy, intense type of feel. Makes you think that you're going to get a really intense movie. Well, that was a great deceiver, wasn't it? More than likely, Shyamalan is not too proud with how this turned out, and Mark Wahlberg has gone on record in the past that he finds this movie really bad. So if anything, I think everybody involved would just rather forget about this. And if Shyamalan has managed to find his footing again, you know what? Good for him. But yeah, The Happening, it happened. For me, it finally did. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on The Happening if you've seen it. Stay tuned for more videos coming up, and as always, see you in the next one.